Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in once again. So Queen Ahmadiyyah TV presents True Crime. Okay, so let's get into it. Thank you, everyone, for returning to the chat. So we're going to be talking about Sheriff-elect Derwin Brown, who was killed 3 days before he was supposed to take office. His murder or his assassination was set up by his rival, Sheriff Sidney Dorsey, who had run against Derwin as the incumbent, and he lost. And so Dorsey decided to hire somebody to kill Derwin Brown. So let's talk about it. Now, in 2000, blood was shed, and it was a shocking story and a salacious tale of political corruption. Derwin Brown, who had just defeated Sheriff Sidney Dorsey from DeKalb County, the top law enforcement position, was followed to his driveway on his way, or as he pulled into his home. Now, voters had elected Brown largely on the promise that he made to clean up corruption and kickbacks that caused trouble, had been a problem that plagued the office for decades. Now, he was just days away from taking office to begin fulfilling that pledge. And so let me tell you something. So Derwin Brown was a good cop. He was a very good cop. He was, set on, getting rid of corrupt deputies that worked for the DeKalb County Police Department. Sidney Dorsey, however, was a corrupt cop. There were things about him that kept coming out, or for things like, first of all, let me say that he was the lead investigator, right? The lead detective on the Atlanta child murders. That's one of his claims to fame. He was the lead detective on the Atlanta child murders back in the 80s. But also when he was the sheriff, he would do things like he would have his deputies go in police cruisers to do things that like pick his children up from school. Okay. Supposedly, spending money that he wasn't supposed to spend, having his officers go out here and engage in nefarious activities and things like that. And so a lot of people knew about these practices that he had going on or whatever. And Sheriff-elect Derwin Brown had said that he was going to put a stop to it once he got in office, if elected. So anyway, there was trouble with the outgoing Sheriff Dorsey because he was afraid of an investigation. You see, because Derwin Brown had promised that when he got in office, if he did, he was going to have Dorsey investigated for his corruption and other deputies as well. Now, so that's one reason that he was already mad. He was going to, he was mad that he lost after the election. He's clearly upset about that. But he was also concerned that he'd be going to jail for corrupt things that he had done if those things came to light. So Derwin Brown, he was a veteran of more than 20 years in DeKalb policing. And he was ambushed when he arrived home from a party on December the 15th of 2000. He took at least 10 to 12 bullets. And here's the thing. He actually had gone out to celebrate that night with his wife and daughters. He went out to celebrate, had a couple of drinks or whatever, and then celebrate his victory, and that he was supposed to be sworn in like 3 days later. So his wife and children left before he did. Of course, his daughters were adults, but his wife and daughters, they left before he did, because it was getting kind of late, but he stayed there and hung out just a little bit longer with some of his colleagues. So when he pulled into the driveway, and his assassination reminded me of when Medgar Evers was assassinated. Remember, those of you that know the story about Medgar Evers, they made a movie about it with Whoopi Goldberg called Ghost of Mississippi. When Medgar Evers pulled into his driveway, he was assassinated right there by, I forget the guy's name, Breckenridge or something like that, the guy that killed him. He was hiding in the bushes across the street or behind a tree. And so that's pretty much the same thing that they did when they assassinated Sheriff-elect Derwin Brown. Pulled into the driveway, he got out. He had a bouquet of roses in his hand. He had bought those for his wife because it was her birthday. So anyway, as he got out of the car, they started shooting at him with a Tech 9, okay? So anyway, he was ambushed when he arrived home from a party on December the 15th of 2000. He took at least 10 bullets and fell to the ground clutching roses that he had bought for his wife for her birthday. Now, Brown left behind 5 children, and his wife, Phyllis, who suspected Dorsey from the beginning, she suspected in the beginning that he had played a hand in the killing. And another thing is, he and his wife Phyllis, they were like high school sweethearts. Okay, so when she was on trial and she testified against Dorsey, she said, "You called him the lowest scumbag on earth, but I beg to differ. That is you. That is you. And as you watch yourself in the mirror, you are the lowest scumbag on the earth." That day, Dorsey claimed that he was innocent. He said that he was innocent and he was convicted still, nevertheless. So the judge says, "I know you are going to," no, this is what he said to the judge. I'm sorry, during his trial, after he was convicted, Dorsey stood up and says, "I know you are going to sentence me severely." He said as he looked at the judge, raising his open palms for emphasis, "But I do not have the blood of Derwin Brown on my hands." That's what he said. But guess what? He actually did have the blood of Derwin Brown in his hands, because he's the one who paid for the hit against him. And also, he ended up confessing later. Okay? He actually ended up confessing later. Now, there were two men accused of killing Sheriff-elect Derwin Brown on the orders of the outgoing sheriff, Sidney Dorsey, and they were actually acquitted of charges. Now, David Ramsey and Melvin Walker were charged in the ambush slaying of Sheriff-elect Derwin Brown, who was gunned down in his driveway 3 days before he was supposed to be sworn in. The case against the two men was based solely on, almost completely and solely on testimony of two alleged participants in the plots. Now, they said that the outgoing sheriff, Sidney Dorsey, ordered the hit and that the four men carried it out, with Walker serving as the trigger man after the men drew straws. So they all got together, these four dudes, and they drew straws to see who was going to, be the one who was going to, pull the trigger. So Brown had defeated Dorsey in a bitter campaign 4 months earlier after promising to clean up corruption in the sheriff's department. And not long before his death, he had vowed to fire at least 38 of Dorsey's deputies. So you can imagine they were all ticked off. And these men who were accused of killing him, these four guys, they were deputies themselves. So Dorsey was alleged to have ordered the killing because he was angry about losing the election and because Brown was helping authorities investigate the corruption. Now, Dorsey was set to go on trial in June on the murder and racketeering charges. He said that he had nothing to do with the slaying. Walker said Walker was a sheriff's deputy and Ramsey worked for Dorsey's private security company. Now, the defense rested its case without calling forth witnesses. The state has done nothing. This is what they say. The state has done nothing other than attempt to sacrifice David Ramsey and Melvin Walker in an attempt to get Sidney Dorsey. This is what Xavier Dix, Ramsey's attorney, said in his closing argument. Now, District Attorney J. Tom Morgan, citing a gag order in the case, would not say how the verdicts would affect his case against Dorsey. The two chief witnesses for the prosecution were Paul Skyers, who worked for Dorsey's security company, and Patrick Cuffey, who was a sheriff's deputy. So two of them were sheriff's deputies and who had worked for Dorsey, and then two of them were people who worked for Dorsey's private security company. They were given immunity from prosecution in exchange for their testimony. So Walker's attorney, Max Richardson, said, "The jurors have spoken, and they've expressed their feelings about the state's star witnesses." Richardson said that he had doubts Dorsey could be convicted on the same testimony. David Ramsey, facing the camera, he then hugged his attorney after being acquitted of the murder of Derwin Brown, the DeKalb County sheriff-elect, allegedly killed at the behest of the man he defeated. Phyllis Brown, his wife, well, she reacted to the acquittal of the two men accused of killing her husband, and her son Douglas was right there next to her when this all occurred. Sidney, so evil, petty, and trifling against your brother. Absolutely. And yes, it is very sad, Cutie Tootie. Very sad indeed. So anyway, here's the thing, though. Dorsey, continued to say that he was innocent, that he had nothing to do with it. But we later found out that wasn't true. Now, there were two men that were actually convicted for the murder for hire of Sheriff-elect Derwin Brown, and Melvin Walker and Ramsey. Now, they were convicted of conspiracy to commit murder for hire. They had been acquitted on a previous trial They had been acquitted in a state trial in March of 2002. So you know what they do. Like, you know, they say there's double jeopardy, so you can't try the person twice for the same crime. How they often get away with that, because they still do it. Trust me, they're going to do what they want to do, honey. So how they often get away with this is they try you for the state crime. And if you get off and they don't get you convicted like they plan to, then they just go back and charge you federally. Okay? That's how that works. So but anyway, they were acquitted in a state trial in March of 2002. Sheriff-elect Derwin Brown was shot at least a dozen times in front of his home on December the 15th of 2000, just days before he was to have succeeded DeKalb County Sheriff Sidney Dorsey, the man who had defeated in that year's election. Now, suspicions immediately turned on Dorsey, who was convicted of plotting the murder in a separate state court trial and was then sentenced to life in prison. Prosecutors argued that Walker, the suspected triggerman, was promised a promotion to deputy sheriff if he killed Sheriff Derwin Brown, or Sheriff-elect Derwin Brown. Now, Ramsey, the alleged backup shooter, because they had a triggerman, they had a backup shooter. He was promised a job as a detention officer. And then the defense argued that two co-conspirators granted immunity by prosecutors were the real killers. This is what the defense attorneys were saying. Because, of course, they got to say whatever they can say to get their clients off and shift the blame and cause reasonable doubts. So anyway, they basically said that no, the two men who got the deal and were granted immunity, they were the ones who actually did the killings. So anyway, everyone, please be sure to get the likes up. Please like and share the video so that draw more people into the viewing through the algorithm. Okay. So anyway, they were granted immunity by the prosecutors, and he says they were the real killers, and they are the ones who accused Walker and Ramsey to save themselves. Now, both Walker and Ramsey sat stoically as Brown's relatives and supporters spoke of their loss. Brown's mother, Derwin Brown, called the verdict the end of a long fight. She said, "I experienced a great deal of pain and anger for almost 5 years," she said as she held a picture of her son. "It's a pain so severe that it seems I almost have been dying a slow death." Federal prosecutors Bobby Bernstein told the judge that Walker and Ramsey stole the trust of the entire community when they killed Derwin Brown. They say this is not bitterness, this is not vengeance, but finally justice, Bernstein said. So that's, you know, that was all okay. General Louverture said rat. Absolutely, yes, absolutely. They all were complicit in it, right? And then two of them snitched so that they could get less time. So now let's talk about Sheriff Sidney Dorsey, when he actually confessed to doing this, right? Because he did confess, and I believe it was in 2007, after he, of course, was still in prison and had exhausted all of his appeals. So he clearly knew he wasn't getting out. So he probably figured, I got nothing to lose. So that's how that all went down. Everyone, please don't seem like justice. Absolutely not. It doesn't. Everyone, please get the likes up. Please like and share the video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Okay. Just a moment, people. I'm looking for the receipts. Okay. Let me just Google it. Here we go. Okay, so former DeKalb County Sheriff Sidney Dorsey confessed to ordering the hit on his would-be successor. But he said he later, now listen to this BS, okay? He said he later called it off. That's what District Attorney Gwen Keys Fleming said. Now, at Mr. Dorsey's request, he and Ms. Fleming met on July the 13th of 2007 at the Georgia State Penitentiary in Reedsville, where Mr. Dorsey was serving his life prison sentence after being convicted of plotting the killing of his rival, DeKalb County Sheriff-elect Derwin Brown. Now, Mr. Brown was gunned down on December the 15th of 2000 in his driveway. And before the meeting, Sidney Dorsey had never acknowledged any involvement in the murder, the assassination of Sheriff-elect Derwin Brown. He was implicated, however, through two of the 4 men who were charged in the killing. And all of the employees of the DeKalb County Sheriff's Office who allegedly were promised preferential treatment if Mr. Dorsey returned to office after the hits. So according to Ms. Fleming, Mr. Dorsey told her that after the August the 12th, 2000 election, he says he was furious. He was very angry about losing and that his marriage was in turmoil in the wake of sexual harassment allegations. A few days after the election, Mr. Dorsey gave Patrick Cuffey a note ordering the assassination of Sheriff-elect Derwin Brown. But Mr. Dorsey said that a few weeks later, he cooled off and had a change of heart. So he says, yeah, I was crazy. I was out of my mind. I wanted to move on with my life. Forget that. So Ms. Fleming said Dorsey told her, or said that he told Mr. Cuffey, Mr. Dorsey, hold on. Okay, he says, I wanted to move on with my life. So, and forget about it. So he obviously is saying that he told Patrick Cuffey that he didn't want to kill Derwin after all, and that he had no knowledge that the assassination would proceed. Now, here's how you know that's all just BS. First of all, if you tell someone to murder someone, if you're going to give them some type of compensation, right, like money, a higher position, and then you tell them not to commit the murder, what are they going to do it for? Because clearly, if you've already called it off, they have nothing to gain. So why would they continue to do it? Now, unless, of course, you could argue that maybe they still didn't want Derwin to be in office because he was having this investigation into the corruption and planned on firing at least 38 deputies, of which these 2 were deputies. But at the end of the day, don't you think that Sheriff Derwin Brown still knew that it was going to happen? I don't think he called anything off. He's full of BS. So anyway, Mr. Dorsey's confession has been little consolation, at the time to the Brown family. Derwin Brown's daughter, Brandy Brown Rhodes, who attended the press conference that Thursday, called the confession a complete joke. Okay. Steve Leibel, the attorney for the Brown family, said that, that Thursday when he gave this confession, the development strengthened their claim against the state that Mr. Brown died in the line of duty. So the state of Georgia claimed that they had no more obligation in light of Sheriff's confession to compensate his family. Now, see, this is all important because here's the thing. When Derwin Brown was assassinated, his family, they should have gotten compensated because he died in the line of duty. Now, if he were a white man, I'm sure they would have gotten compensation. But the state argued that he didn't die while he was in office as sheriff. He died 3 days prior to him getting sworn in. So they said because he wasn't sworn in, the $300 million that should have gone to the family, they weren't going to get it because the state refused. However, the state did give them a measly $75,000, okay, $75,000. But they would have gotten more had he been killed after he was sworn in. At the end of the day, they tried to say that he wasn't killed in the line of duty, but he actually was. I mean, he may not have been out there at a crime scene at the time he was killed, but he was still a police officer. He was the next sheriff to be. So anyway, that's how that all went down. But let me tell you something. God doesn't like ugly, because Sidney Dorsey, the one who set up this whole assassination, well, his own son ended up dying. He was shot multiple times, and it was January the 29th of 2018. Yeah, his son, Sidney Dorsey Jr., he was murdered. Okay? So looks like the chickens came home to roost. Sneaky, dirty, cheapskate devils. Terry said, tell it, Queen. Thank you, beloved. So so that's the nefarious story, and it was really sad because, like I said, Derwin Brown was a good cop, and where I think that he made a mistake was, I think that he should not have revealed that he had planned to get rid of these corrupt cops. I think that he should not have said that he was going to fire 38 of those deputies. Now, I'm not blaming him for his death, of course, because like I said, I knew Derwin Brown. He was a very nice person. But I'm saying that I just wish that he hadn't let that be known, because once he let that be known that he was going after them for corruption, and he had 38 people at least that he was going to get rid of, that just made him a lot of enemies. That's what that did. That made a lot of people his enemies and gave a lot of people motives to kill him. So I'm sure it was very easy for Sheriff Sidney Dorsey to get these 4 guys to agree, you know, to carrying out the plot. So yes, that's the story of Sidney Dorsey with his nefarious self, right? Who hired people to kill the new sheriff. So with that all being said, I'm going to conclude this broadcast. I will be coming right back on my other channel, right? Queen Ahmadiyyah TV presents Beyond the Realm. If you haven't subscribed to that channel, please do. It's awesome. So I'm going to be talking about the story behind the movie The Shining by Stephen King. There's actually a haunted hotel where they got the whole idea from, and it's called the Stanley Hotel in Colorado. Okay? So that all being said, let's talk about it when I come back, and I hope you all return to the chats for my next live. Please like and share the video. Make sure that you subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so. Click the notification bell and click the word all to make sure that you get your notifications each time I go live. If you haven't been receiving your notifications, please double check to make sure that you're still subscribed to the channel. Don't forget to follow the Queen on Instagram at QueenAhmadiyyah. Also on Instagram at divine_goddess_27. On Brighton and Patreon at Queen Ahmadiyyah. Peace.